Well, hi there. My name is Perry, and welcome to the Literary Niterary. So today I am here to film my April wrap-up, which I'm a little bit nervous about because I've never done a wrap-up like verbally before, and also because I read more books in April than I think I probably have in any other month since I was like 10, probably. In April, I read 21 individual books. I read one book twice for a total of roughly 6,865 pages. Of those, 8 of them were young adult books, whereas 15 were marketed towards adults. So that's about 1/3 to 2/3. I feel like I read a lot more YA this month than I usually do, at least like proportionally. I don't know if that's true or not, but something about it and the like immediacy of the characters and the ease with which you get into the stories has been really appealing to me in these sort of trying global times. So yeah, about 1/3 YA books. In terms of release year, I mostly read things that came out last year. I read 11 2019 releases, and then 2 each that were released in 2018 and 2020, and then 7 other books that were released before the year 2018. So in terms of genre, I had a hard time sort of categorizing some of these books neatly, and I sort of tried to make my genre categorizations to fit the books that I read, but even that didn't really solve all the problems, so take all of this with a grain of salt. But I read 7 books with some kind of speculative elements of science fiction or fantasy on any level, 4 mysteries, 2 thrillers, 3 non-fiction books, 2 sort of YA contemporaries with a romantic element, 1 sort of adult genre romance, 1 YA historical fiction, and then 1 like general fiction book that was also half historical fiction and I think was supposed to be like dark and twisty like a mystery or a thriller, but like didn't really deliver. But we'll talk about that soon. So that should conclude the overview for now, and now let's get into the individual books themselves. The first book I finished in the month of April was The Weight of the Stars by Ancrum, which is about a girl named Ryan Bird, who is, after sort of a tragic accident that killed both of her parents, she's in charge of her younger brother and her younger brother's child. And so she is trying to make it the best that she can. And she sort of assembled this like found family of other teens at her school that she sort of saw were having issues, and she reached out and decided to take care of them. So her teacher asks her to do the same for a new girl who is famous because her mother left on sort of a one-way space expedition right after she was born. And then the relationship between Ryan and this new girl is sort of pitched as like a slow burn enemies to lovers romance. This was an interesting book for me because I liked the second half so much better than the first half. Like the first half I was really just sort of putting up with, and then the second half I absolutely loved. It made me feel all the things. I cried a lot, and I gave it 4 stars. I saw Gabby review this book and she DNF'd it around the 50% mark, and I think the problems I was having with the first half of the book were actually very similar to the ones that she talked about. I also don't get that interested in YA contemporaries where people like throw wild parties, because that just wasn't part of my high school experience. So yeah, the first half of the book didn't really hold my interest, but then in the second half, there was a little bit more of a driving plot engine while they were trying to sort of figure things out and make some bigger decisions. The central relationship, which is a female-female relationship, progressed a little bit, and everyone was sort of facing some big decisions, and it was just a lot more interesting to me after that. Also, the space element became much more prominent, which upped the stakes and the emotional sort of ante significantly. This book did something that I really like from sort of a almost scholarly level, which is the thing where like you get information about the characters' parents and how they sort of caused problems, made things wrong, and then it's up to the people of the next generation to figure out how to make things right. The sort of pattern that I'm referring to comes from books like Wuthering and The Winter's Tale. And that sort of intergenerational conflict is really interesting to me, where somehow your parents, through flaws of their own, or short-sightedness, or selfishness, have made a big old mess, and it's your job in the next generation. It's like the problem can't be solved until the next generation. And I don't know what my official scholarly take on that is yet, but it's something that I'm interested in exploring further. The second book I read in April was Eternal Life by Dara, which I gave like 3.5 stars. This is also sort of hard to classify. I called it speculative because the premise of it is that the central character and one other person in the world, they can't die. They literally can't die. So they've both been alive since the time of Roman-occupied Jerusalem. and it takes us up to the present day, like the year 2018, I think. It's sort of just a meditation on like that hypothetical of like what would happen if you lived for that long, what you would learn, what you would want, whether you would still be able to muster any faith in like the project of humanity. Large sections of the book are devoted to things that happened in the often distant past, again in sort of Roman-occupied Jerusalem, which I really enjoyed. I definitely don't read enough historical fiction set like in the way back when, so that was really interesting to me. Overall though, the like philosophical meditations on like what it would mean to live forever, like, didn't do anything that special for me, especially since I didn't feel like there was a clear arc in terms of the character thinking about this over the course of the book. Like, the progression of her thoughts didn't really make sense to me. That's all. The author didn't sell me on the sort of emotional arc of the book, but it was a pleasant reading experience, and I think crafted well, so yeah, I landed on like 3.5 stars. I enjoyed it. The next book I read was The Brilliant Death by Amy Rose Capetta, which is an Italian-inspired young adult fantasy that deals with witchcraft and shape-shifting and family loyalty and like political intrigue and all sorts of fun stuff. I had been looking forward to this since I read Echo After Echo by Amy Rose Capetta a few years ago. The sort of hook for this one is that both the main character and the love interest are gender fluid, and the way that this is sort of brought into the story is through the speculative element of shape-shifting, which I just think is really, really interesting. I thought it was well done that the two shape-shifting gender fluid characters relate to their gender identities in 2 different ways. I liked the nuance there. This book is queer as all get out, and just systematically attacks the gender binary, which is great. I thought the writing was particularly like lush and vivid as well. I liked that a lot. Maybe I'm an insane person, but I feel like when I was a teenager reading YA, I don't remember characters dying as much as they suddenly seem to now that I've been like come back to YA after a few years. Like, there were definitely books where a character died, but it was like a YA contemporary and it was an issues book, and that was the issue of the book. But since coming back to it, I've been like totally shocked by the fact that like they kill off characters, which maybe I shouldn't be, but like, that's a child. That's a dead child. I don't know, it hit me in a weird way. And it kind of hit me in a weird way here too. I'm not going to tell you who dies, but like there is a death, and it hit me in a weird way. That's not a knock on the book. I really liked it. I want to sort of review the duology as a unit, I think. But yeah, it was beautifully written. That's my main takeaway from it, was smash the gender binary and just beautifully written. The next book I read was Recursion by Blake Crouch, which is a science fiction twisty-turny meditation on themes of time travel, memory, and like the very nature of reality. So, you know, there was a lot going on. Mostly my thoughts on this were that like someone should make it into a movie, and that it would probably be even better suited to being a movie than it is to being a book, which I don't think is something I've ever said before, but like, I think time loop stories can be well suited to visual media because you can ground someone in a scene and make them aware that it's the exact same scene as they've seen before without having to have the character describe everything the same way again and then be like, and then he realized that it was the same day that he had lived, and like the audience will pick up on it way faster in film. So I feel like that would have trimmed the book down, because my main criticism of the book, I guess, was that it was just way longer than I thought it was going to be. Like, I think a lot of people have mentioned that there's sort of a false climax to the book where you think it's going to end, and then it goes on for like 150 more pages after that. So yeah, I had questions about the sort of plot arc of the book, and I think some parts of it, I don't think this story was actually perfectly suited to be a novel. I think some parts of it would have been better told in the medium of film. But it was like pure entertainment, a great time, couldn't put it down while I was reading it. So yeah, 4 stars. Next, I started a new to me mystery series, which is the Franny Fisher series by Kerry Greenwood. The first book is Cocaine Blues, and then I read the subsequent 3 books this month, which are called Flying Too High, Murder on the Ballarat Train, and Death at Victoria Dock. And as a whole series so far, I would give these about 3 to 3.5 stars, depending. What's really cute about these is that they are set in the 1920s, and they're also set in Australia, so that was sort of my nod to Aussie April, was picking up these books. So yes, Miss Franny Fisher is she's like a street urchin turned society lady turned private investigator, if that makes sense. The whole like society thing isn't stimulating enough for her. So she decides to go back to Australia where she grew up and start being a private investigator. And she takes different cases over the course of each of these books. But yeah, these are pretty good. There's sort of a dry, tongue-in-cheek kind of humor, which is nice. There's like 1920s set dressing, which is nice. So like there's a lot of talk about like the clothes that she wears and the weird food that they ate, which is all adorable. There's sort of a thing that I really like in mystery books where there'll be an A plot and a B plot, and then sometimes by the end, the A plot and the B plot are actually the same plot, and they were like intimately connected the whole time, which is like very satisfying from a plot standpoint. Yeah, if you're looking for a long series, there's 20 books in the series. If you're looking for a long series that will like adequately occupy your time, and basically give you something where you don't have to make a decision about what to pick up next, I think these are great. That's kind of why I started reading them, was sort of because of the 1920s Australia setting, which is not something I've read before, and because I knew that they would give me something that I could pick up without really having to like think about it. There are backlist series, so I haven't had to wait for one at my library yet. I'll just borrow the ebook and it's available immediately. Yeah, they're pretty cute and great. The one thing I'll say about them is that the tone can be a little bit weird. Like, I think they're a cozy mystery series. I think that's where we are in sort of the like genre world. But the things that happen to like the crimes that happen, especially around like the abuse and exploitation of young women, are probably appropriate to the time period, but feel a little melodramatic sometimes. Like, it's just so bad that you're like, oh no. But so somehow, even though it has things in it thematically that are very dark, because the tone is so light, it almost doesn't hit you all the way. Like, you don't feel like you read a news story about a young woman being exploited or abused. But maybe that's what makes it feel melodramatic, is that it almost doesn't feel justified or earned by like the setup, the world of the book even, for something that bad to happen in a world that's mostly otherwise about like having a whiskey hot toddy and driving my very expensive racing car and I can fly a plane. Like, and then suddenly being like, also children are forced into prostitution. It's just like, the what now? It's a little incongruous, but yeah, all in all, I'm gonna continue with the series. I'm probably gonna read the next 16 books, and it's good. 3 stars, it's good. Okay, next was a book that I actually really enjoyed, which was The Bromance Book Club by Lyssa K. Adams. I gave this like a high-ish 4 stars, like almost 4.5. This is the story of Gavin and Thea, who got married pretty quickly after Thea got pregnant. And also Gavin is a minor league baseball player, which I didn't care about at all. I don't care about sports. But basically now their marriage is on the rocks, and Thea has asked for a divorce, and Gavin is devastated. But he ends up being initiated into the Bromance Book Club, which is sort of a group of dude bros who read romance books for advice about how to deal with their lady problems, which is a fairly delightful premise. Some people have talked about this book being like a little too like wish fulfillment-y, and saying that like they didn't believe that a bunch of bros would sit around and read romance books, which is frankly the point of the book. But what I think this manages to do is it manages to be self-aware enough to really pull it off. Like, the idea that they would use romance novels as a pattern for actual behavior is not a perfect one. But even within the book, they have a conversation about like whether The Little Mermaid is anti-feminist or not. And one guy is like, well, you have to say that women and girls can't distinguish between fiction and reality is like belittling to them. Like, obviously they can tell that this is a cartoon movie about a girl who's half fish and not like, you know, a book telling them how they should live their lives. And so I think the parts of this book that are unrealistic, or that you could argue like, well, is that what women really want? Can you say that that's what all women really want? Are sort of neatly done away with by how self-aware and like almost meta-textual the book is. The other reason that I really liked this was that I just really cared about the couple, like more than I've ever cared about a particular couple in a romance novel before. Usually when I'm reading a romance novel, I care about the couple getting together in as far as like that will satisfy the plot and genre conventions, and that will make me happy because the book did the thing that I was expecting the book to do. It's like when you're listening to a phrase of music and you predict where the notes should go, like you just sort of have an innate sense that like the phrase is going to finish off with a certain tone, and then it does, and you're like, ooh, That's what romance novels usually do for me. But this one, I was really actively invested in this relationship. And so I think something to explore further might be the marriage in peril trope, which I know a lot of people find stressful, but I think that might have been why it was so much easier for me to care about this relationship, was that they sort of had history already. I don't know if that's what it was or if it was just Lyssa K. Adams writing, so to be safe, I'm going to be continuing on in the series. Next, I read what is technically my highest rated book of April, which was Sorry I'm Late, I Didn't Want to Come by Jessica Pan. The subtitle, depending on where you live, is either like An Introvert's Year of Saying Yes or An Introvert's Year of Living Dangerously. I gave this 5 stars. I read it twice in the month of April. First in like one sitting for like pure enjoyment, which was what I gave it 5 stars based on mostly, and then pretty much immediately, a few days later, I sat down and read it again in chunks, taking notes. The one thing I kind of want to say about this book, like my major criticism of it, is like she puts introvert in the title and she uses introvert a lot throughout the book, but she's not really using it to talk about introversion. She's using it as shorthand for like a shy, socially awkward introvert whose like shyness is problematically interfering with their life and happiness. And all of that is a lot that is not thoroughly captured by the word introvert. And she acknowledges that in the introduction of the book, but then she sort of goes on to do it anyway. I think because, especially in the title, because ever since that book Quiet came out, which is also mentioned in the book, there's a lot of like cultural discourse around introversion and extroversion, and this marketing it this way helps it sort of hop into that cultural conversation when that's not really what it's about. It's not about an introvert trying to cure herself of introversion. And she acknowledges by the end of the book that no matter how much time she spends socializing, she still wants to go home and take a nap afterwards, because that's how she is. She can't change that about herself. And she doesn't want to. She just wants, like, you know, some friends maybe. And that resonated deeply with me. And so basically what she does is she writes out a list of challenges that she wants to try over the course of a year because she's not happy with how she's living her life. And she tries them all and sort of keeps track of the experience. So I would 100% recommend this book to anyone who likes I tried reading like videos, or any kind of experiment video, or challenge thing where you like make rules for yourself and try to live them. It was like the macro version of a like I tried reading like blank video, and I loved that part of it. Would also recommend this book for anyone who feels like their shyness is kind of a barrier to their happiness and would maybe want some ideas about how to get over it. A lot of her ideas are not really practicable in a self-isolation social paradigm, but I have my notes and I'll pull them out again when I can use them. The next book I read in April was Tell Me How You Really Feel by Amina May Safi, which is a YA contemporary centered around basically a female-female romance. This book has great representation. The cover is perfect. I would die for this book cover. The book itself was like 3 stars. It was okay. Basically, Rachel, who's the one main character, is making a movie, but she's super, super behind, and if she doesn't finish it by the deadline, her teacher is going to pull her recommendation letter that she already sent to the college she wants to go to and got into, and might also have to fail her for the course, so that would basically screw up her whole future. So the teacher makes her cast this other girl, Sana, who Rachel has hated ever since freshman year. Sana asked her out, and Rachel thought she was asking her out as a cruel joke. And it's sort of a rom-com from there. It was sweet, it was cute, but I just don't think it was perfectly executed. Like, first of all, not to spoil anything, but one of the main characters gets injured several times throughout the book, both times for like sheer plot convenience, like, oh, she can't be doing X thing anymore, so we need to break her. And it was almost silly to me, the amount that this character got like damaged over the course of the book. I was like, they just can't leave this poor girl alone, can they? And then the other thing I sort of had with it is that I think it was just a little bit too long. I think there was like one too many obstacle thrown in the path of the sort of central romance. I really think this whole book should have been propelled by a sense of urgency because, again, both characters are sort of operating on a deadline. They have 1 month to fix all of the problems in their lives, and the beginning of every section of the book tells you how many days until deadline. But even with that, it didn't feel like there was quite enough like forward momentum in the narrative. And it felt like it meandered a little bit around the 2/3 to 3/4 mark, so I think just a little more cutting could have really helped this book out. Okay, that is it for today. I'm probably gonna have to break this video up into 2 parts because I have been filming for an hour because yikes. I will be coming back with part 2 as soon as possible, and in the meantime, I hope you're staying happy, healthy, and safe. I hope you'll tell me about your favorite book that you read in April, and I hope that somewhere there is a great book waiting just for you. Bye!